by not investing in this tactic, the culture doesn't we don't stay at the same place. We actually move back. And so investing is not just a nice to have, it's a need to have because the right has invested in media. They've been investing in TV and in their personalities and exactly. And so we're already behind, but we can't afford to get any more behind.
Navigating the California legislative process can be frustrating and overwhelming. The path to creating policy change in Sacramento is complicated and lined with logistical and political potholes. Unless you live and breathe life at the Capitol, chances are you don't even know where to start. That is why I'm so happy to share with you my new book, Changemaker, an insider's guide to getting shit done at the California Capitol. This is a one-of-a-kind guide that demystifies California government and the legislative process into accessible, actionable steps with real-life advice to give you the confidence you need to step up and win. To check out my book, please go to the website www.kbhadvocacy.com/changemaker. You can pick up a copy online, or you can head to Capitol Books on K Street in downtown Sacramento. And for you Bay Area changemakers out there, on February 22nd, I will be hosting a book signing at the one and only Manny's. You can find more information about the event, again, on the website. Just click on the events link and you'll see all the information you need, along with a link to RSVP, and let us know you're coming. Thanks again. Enjoy the show. And hey, spread the word. You may have heard about the creator economy and think it has nothing to do with your legislation, your advocacy at the Capitol, the politics at play. Well, I promise, after you listen to this episode, you will think again. I recently had the honor to speak with Ashwath Narayanan, who is co-founder and CEO at Social Current. Social Current is a Gen Z-led DC-based service that matches social impact organizations like yours with influencers and content creators who are aligned with your mission and values. In today's episode, Ashwath and I discuss how you can leverage the new and growing tools available through the creator economy to reach and influence your target audience, be it voters, be it lawmakers, or people in the district. We look at examples of past campaigns in which influencer marketing helped organizations win. This is Christina Boss Hamilton, and you are listening to the Blueprint for California Advocates. Hi, welcome to the Blueprint for California Advocates podcast. I am so thrilled today. I'm here welcoming Ashwath Narayanan, who is here from Washington, D.C. as a special guest. And before I get into it, I would love, Ashwath, if you took a moment to introduce yourself and let us know where you started and where are you right now.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's always good to have an opportunity to talk about creators and influencers and all the fun stuff we do at Social Current. But I can sort of start with our story. So I founded Social Current about 3 years ago with the goal of helping impact orgs, nonprofits, purpose-driven organizations reach young people more effectively, because I was in a lot of spaces where decisions were being made about young people without young people. It made no sense that there were no young people there. And so I was like, I'm going to start an agency. I'm going to hire more young people, and we're going to represent ourselves in these spaces. And so we started doing a little bit of everything. We didn't have a ton of clients. And so we were doing a lot of cold outreach, saying yes to anything we could from an impact organization. And then an organization called Community Change reached out. They're a DC-based nonprofit. They do a lot of organizing work. And they were doing a campaign around the child tax credit, which is a tax policy that the Biden administration passed in 2021. And unfortunately, it's no longer there. But they were trying to do some work around the child tax credit and get it outside of where it was currently being talked about, which was in traditional media in DC, behind paywalls, into their communities on social media. And at the same time, they were trying to figure out, how do I center my communities in this approach instead of speaking to them from the outside, like an approach like ads would do. And we were like, hey, why don't you find a bunch of TikTok creators from your community? And why don't you hire them to talk about their experiences? And so over the next 2 weeks, we helped them hire, train, and recruit about 15 creators. All of them had a lived experience around the child tax credit, and all they did was say what they used it for, Our goal with the campaign was to reach about 100,000 people. We did 4 times as much and sent over 10,000 people the resources around the child tax credit. And we really saw the power of working with creators, because we did a campaign where we brought on people that had never done posts in politics to do their first post with community change. We got to pay people who were outside the progressive space to talk about the progressive space. And then we also got to have fun watching really fun content doing it. And so we were like, we're just going to do this. We're not going to do typical campaigns. We're just going to do influencer work. And over the last 2 years have helped tens of organizations work with thousands of creators. And we've started building out tech to make it easier as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and Social Current and what we're building.
I love it. You are so speaking my language, even though I am not a Gen Z, proud Gen Xer here, but you are speaking my language, which is talking in a way that people will hear and listen and absorb and act, versus being lectured to and advertised to in ways that do not connect at all. So I love it. I see this as the intersection between the relatively new emerging creator economy, which for folks who are not familiar is people who create content direct to the masses. And that could be on multiple types of social media platforms, podcasts, YouTube. It could be long form, short form, whatever. But really what it is about people turning into creators and speaking to their population, their audience. And, frankly, that has turned out to be a huge thing and has succeeded in launching careers and clearly makes a lot of money for advertisers that are looking to reach new audiences. And the intersection between the creator economy and the political and the policymaking world is something that is so exciting to me. At least in California, there's been a lot of policy discussion around social media platforms and the negative that they do, the algorithms, and specifically targeting young kids is very concerning and something I'm very passionate about, because I have an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old, and if it was up to them, that's all they would do all day is be on social media. Let's flip the script on how social media could be a cause for good and use the algorithms to benefit society versus making profit at the expense of the lives of people, basically. So let's take a second back and talk about a particular campaign that you could reference. And you don't even need to say the name of the organization or anything, but just even like a case study, walking us through what does it look like for an advocacy org or a campaign, political campaign that is trying to reach a target audience that is within your purview. Where would that conversation start?
For sure. Before we go into case studies, I want to set some context for the audience around general macro trends we're seeing that drive the creator economy. And so I think one of the main things that we've seen over the last 2 decades really is there's been a growing distrust of institutions. Less people trust institutions than ever before. And so when you think about communicating with audiences, they don't want to consume as much information from institutions, which has now been replaced by people, friends, creators they follow on social media to consume information. That's a really important thing to keep in mind when thinking about why the creator economy is growing, is because who we're consuming our information from is less the news media and more people we follow that we start to build parasocial relationships with. And then the second driver has sort of been short form content. YouTube for the longest time has been the real driver of social media, of culture on the internet. And then when TikTok came out, TikTok started to take up a little bit of the role. YouTube is still the original platform where everything is done, but there's been a shift into more short form formats of content over the long form that reach audiences. That's why YouTube is investing so much in YouTube Shorts and Instagram is investing so much in Reels. And so I think the sort of lack of trust in institutions and the growing focus on short form is what a lot of our conversation today will be about. But talking about case studies, I think the way I describe creator work to people is it can really be anything. You don't have to work with creators on a specific thing, but you're working with these people that have large audiences, that have, an audience that follows them for their content and an audience that trusts them. And so you can work with them on a campaign that is focused on driving petition signatures. You can work on a campaign that's focused on persuasion. You can work on a campaign that's focused on lobbying for a specific bill or an action towards an audience in a specific state. You can work with them to tell stories around lived experiences. That's where most of our work lies is, for example, right now we're doing a campaign around caregiving. And we're working with creators to talk about the high costs of childcare. And so all of the creators that are part of the campaign are parents. And one of them had to choose between staying at home or going to work and chose to stay at home and build an online business because the cost of childcare was so high. And so a lot of our work can be finding the creators that have lived experiences around a nonprofit's issue or around a bill, and then getting them to share their, stories and lived experiences on social media to convince their audience to support them around the issue. And the audience tends to trust them because of that relationship factor and because someone is sharing their story. So it can look a lot of different ways, but that's just one example.
Let me ask, what does the data show, or where's the evidence that leads to people actually taking action?
So we have a lot of examples where we did one campaign around urging Republican members of Congress to not shut down the government. And so we worked with creators to promote it through Instagram stories. And we got over 20,000 petitions, with the cost per petition being under $5 in partnership with creators. So that's a real tangible example where if you're spending money on ads, or if your cost per petition is typically in the like $6, $7, $8 mark, but this was $5 or less with creators. And so that's an example of measuring it. You can also run content through message testing platforms like Grow Progress and Swayable to see persuasion jumps. So you can see if someone watched this video, how much more likely are they able to support this issue versus another. So that's another way we measure sort of impact for clients as well. The real impact that is really hard to measure is the investment in that creator. A lot of the organizations are spending tens and millions on ads that go back to the same companies and the same people. And this is taking a little bit of that budget and spending it in our communities with people that are sort of driving culture. And so that impact is harder to measure, but it is an important thing to keep in the back of your head.
Absolutely. Can you speak to, in terms of voters and electoral outcomes?
There's so many examples of creators putting links to register to vote in their stories. The most common example, and this is a celebrity creator, but Taylor Swift on National Voter Registration Day drove tens of thousands of voter registrations. But we're trying to do sort of a mini version of that with creators that don't have such a large presence as Taylor Swift, but do have concentrated audiences in colleges, or they have concentrated audiences in specific swing states. And so that's another example of working with creators to drive action, in this action specifically registering a vote. One of the examples for a campaign we did is we worked with a creator about 2 weeks before the election to change narrative around voting, specifically around signaling that voting is not that hard. And because a lot of the messaging around voting is make a plan, you have so much work, you have to prepare. And while it is important to prepare, we also wanted to show younger audiences that like it can be a part of your day. And so we had a creator who does day in my life videos, taking care of his grandma. And all he did was like created a typical video, but part of that video was him sending in his ballot. And then at the end of the video was go vote. And the goal with that wasn't to get someone to click on a link. The goal of that was to reach as many people as possible. And the video reached over 1 million people, telling them that they could have voting be a part of their day. And so that's another example of sort of voting focused content in partnership with creators.
How do you all find the influencers that you think are the right messengers?
So for us, we use a very straightforward model around how we're sourcing our creators. We think through the communities our clients are trying to reach, and then go try to find a creator from that community. That's a lot of manual work. So that's going on TikTok, going on YouTube, searching through hashtags, searching through location tags, asking a bunch of creators what they care about, why they care about it, what lived experiences they have, what they're comfortable sharing. So it's a lot of like identifying creators that are creating good content and then consistently asking them what they care about so that we can find the right nonprofit. But for us, it's become a little easier over years because now we have a network in Wisconsin. We can go ask that network if they can recommend us to someone else and things of that sort. So it becomes easier over time. But the like easiest thing to do is go to TikTok, look up specific hashtags around your cause, see who's creating content, or go to TikTok, look up specific personas. For the child tax credit campaign, we obviously knew that parents are using it. So we didn't have to look specifically for parents talking about it. We could just look for any parents and then ask them. And then we sort of came down to our list. So it's a lot of searching, scrolling, which can be fun to do.
So that's the value that you provide to your clients, is that you've done all that work.
Exactly.
Trying to vet the right people who don't have I mean, here's the question that pops up, is making sure that there's not some skeleton in the closet, right?
Right.
Turns out they're running away from something. Totally. So let's walk through the steps then. So you identify your person. I assume you negotiate with the client, what are they trying to do, how long, how much budget they have, et cetera. And then what would be a next step?
For sure. So typically sort of how our average campaign is week one, the client will come to us, they'll set a budget, they'll set their goals. So they'll talk through, is our goal narrative change? Is our goal petition signatures? Is our goal just getting content that we can then boost in ads? Talking through their goal, talking through their budget, talking through who their audience they're trying to reach is. Week two is typically we'll go then find the creators. We'll present the client a list of 10, 20, 100 creators, depending on what they're looking for. The client will then go through the creators. They'll make sure to vet them, make sure internally as well. As an additional vet, they'll make sure they fit in with their values and their policies, all of that. Then they'll select the creators. We'll then negotiate with them. So we'll tell the creators will typically send us the rates they have. We'll then match those rates against our database of what rates should typically be. We'll then sort of come up with a rate, say $1,000 for an Instagram and TikTok. And then we'll see, okay, this creator we're paying $1,000 because they have X followers. The other creator we're paying $3,000 because they have X. So we'll sort of match the budget to make sure we have, the right amount of creators with the right amount of deliverables, with the right amount of budget. We'll send them contracts, they'll sign it. And then at the same time as us sort of building all this, we'll work with the client to build a messaging brief. So it'll be, here's the facts of the campaign, here's sample trends, here's the logistics, here's the deadlines. Because I think an important thing to keep in mind here is the client is still the expert around the policy. And while the creator is the expert around the distribution and the lived experience, the client plays a really important role. And so we want to make sure we reflect that in the messaging brief. We send the creators the messaging brief, and then, they film, they send it for approval to the client approves it, they go live. But the process is pretty collaborative around the creator sort of owning the lane of how it's getting distributed, and the client owning the lane of sort of, here's the expert information that's research backed based on our sort of knowledge, our work.
Imagining, a more grassroots budget, what would you say is you should anticipate to spend at least this much money?
What I always tell organizations that are smaller to mid-sized organizations is you don't have to work with 1,000 creators. You don't have to work with even 10 creators. It could actually be more beneficial to build a deeper relationship with one creator in your state than maybe 10 creators all over the place, because that one creator, you could do consistent videos with them. You could invite them to be a part of your advisory council. You could invite them to, give you advice on your social media. You could build a deeper relationship with a few creators. That could be, $500 a month, $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, but all on one, instead of, hey, let me work with as many as possible. But on the other hand, if you do have budget, you could build deeper relationships with an ambassador list of 5 creators, 10 creators, 25 creators. So it really depends on goals, but don't push yourself to do as many number of creators, because that might not make sense. Going deep with a few might make sense. You could also start by building relationships with creators and giving them value in other ways. If you're doing a gala or an event, you could invite a creator to be a part of it. And think of it very much like when you're asking funders for money, you could also include sort of creators could volunteer views or volunteer their, support.
Wow.
And so that could be
so many
the
ways I'm not even thinking about. Yeah.
But I think it's important to think through how you can also give value to the creators. If you have expertise around a specific issue and you have research and a creator is doing content around that issue, Maybe you can reach out and say, hey, we would love to serve as an extension of your research team. Maybe we can get our research into your video. Or if you know a creator is looking for something, you can be helpful along with paying creators for content. It's important to think through how you can drive value to them, very much like you would engage a volunteer as well. But it is important to pay creators as well.
Oh, obviously. Yeah, right. I'm a very big fan of paying people for their work. Can you give me a dollar amount ballpark, or do you feel it's just depending on so many variables?
It's depending on so many variables. If you're doing a creator campaign with 3 to 5 creators that are between 25,000 followers and 50,000 followers on Instagram, the typical rates we see are $5,000 for the total campaign. So that's an example
that's totally
of where
reasonable.
you could start.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Compared to traditional ads and, mailing and all the stuff, right? That's super reasonable.
Right. And you could
Very
start
cool.
small and scale up over time as well.
I love it. So I assume that this is true in DC, but maybe I'm wrong. You certainly can correct me, but one of my observations, having been an advocate for a while here in Sacramento, is so much of this world, at least as it relates to lobbying, a lot of it is still super analog. And when I say that, I mean, you have a few organizations and lawmakers that have taken the plunge into creating content on these sort of more, Gen Z-ish platforms or whatever. But there is still the ultimate value of making a phone call, right? Like there's still I'm mobilizing people to make phone calls and to do lobby visits, etc. But I putting that aside, I think in terms of communications, there's just a hesitancy to really embrace new media and to invest in things that maybe haven't been proven before. We have examples of candidates that have done it and have done it super successfully, but it still feels like the outlier and not the mainstream. And, one of the things that I talk a lot about with my audience is that as advocates, we come to these campaigns because we want to do the right thing. We want to do good for society, right? We want to see positive change in the world. But we have to kind of at some point move a little bit past that to the point of thinking in a very marketing sense that, the idea that we're trying to promote here is actually a product like anything else. Lawmakers are inundated with every other product under the sun, other ideas, and it's a marketplace. And how do we think in a much more strategic and innovative way around reaching our target audience? Our audience could be a lawmaker. So where are they spending their time?
Right.
And where are they seeing things? But also the target audience is the people. It's the impacted communities who then we're activating to reach out to their lawmakers, which is extremely effective. But my point overall is, and I think it's just something that when you're operating as a little bit of a purist, it sounds almost offensive. I'm not marketing a product, I'm doing the right thing. I'm fighting the good fight. And there's the reality that we live in a certain kind of world, right? People are consumers, unfortunately, before there are a lot of things. And stealing the tactics and strategies of, McDonald's and all of these corporations that literally invest billions in psychology and market research and all the things so that they can sell you more hamburgers. Let's learn from that, right? Let's steal some of that to do actually the opposite of selling people hamburgers. I would love if you talked about that because I feel like it's very much a philosophical question.
Yeah. Typically, we see the nonprofit advocacy and political space follow the for-profit space by 5-10 years, maybe a little more on some stuff, maybe a little more.
Oh my gosh, 5-10 years. Wow. Yeah.
And we've seen sort of that happen in the digital ad space, with digital ads being a very common part of political campaigns now in advocacy. $10 billion will be spent next cycle on Facebook and Google and streaming and all these platforms. We're slowly starting to see that with creator work. The creator economy as an industry is fairly new, but in the brand space, brands in the US are spending, $5-6 billion on influencers. And influencer marketing and the creator industry is growing and has become normalized. I think Goldman Sachs said it's a $250 billion industry now, which is very it was non-existent 10 years ago. The more we see normalizing of this as a tactic, the sort of more political organizations will adapt it. But I also think in politics, there's deeper ties to TV and there's deeper ties to ad firms, and that might have a little bit of a role with creator work because it is an investment. It is sort of like a distribution of the money instead of it all going back to the same platforms and the same firms. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. But I think we're seeing it more. Like for us, a year ago, the question was always like, do we need to pay creators? And now it's more like, how much do we need to pay creators? So I think we're seeing it shift. We're seeing more organizations understand that this is just a new tactic. It's not something wildly different. It's just a new way things are being done to reach people where they are, and more people are adapting. So I think in 2024, our hope is that we'll see it be a big creator election. We'll see a lot, the biggest investment creators we've seen so far. And, based on what we're hearing, it does seem like it will be, but nowhere near ads. But I think, we're slowly starting to see that trend, and we will over the next 4 or 5 years.
I'm chuckling as you're talking, because I realized as you were saying it's just a new way of doing things, that it's actually an old way of doing things, in the sense of trusted members of the community being, people going to them for advice on what should I do? Should I vote for? It goes back to the town square and who are the community leaders. And in fact, when you think about mobilizing communities, that is something people have always done, is like, who do people trust? Let's go to them. Let's talk to them and win their support on what we're trying to do. It's building on the trusting messenger and using these new platforms to elevate those voices. We know how to win these things. We just, sometimes we don't know how to keep up with how people are talking to each other.
Right.
The other thing too is that, at least I'm sure as it relates to political campaigns, you have a lot of the folks who've been doing the same thing every year for a long time, not looking to change it up. They're making money just fine as it is, and have maybe even a prejudice against new technology in general. And, there's that reality too, that you have people in decision-making positions who aren't even open to the idea of trying something new.
Right. And I think there's also a little bit of fear of going first, because if you do make the first large investment and it doesn't work for another reason, you still get blamed. The creator work gets blamed, even though it may be a fully separate factor. And so I think we're slowly starting to see organizations build larger programs that invest millions of dollars in creators in their communities. It's just a matter of time before creator work is at the sort of forefront as a tactic, as ads is, and as other tactics are.
So then what you're pointing to is that now is a fantastic opportunity to get in at the ground floor, really, if you think about it.
And build relationships with creators and start sort of doing the early work so that you can be at the forefront of it.
Probably at a level you'll never pay again in another year or 2 or 3. Yeah, 100%. I think especially when you think about narrative change as a campaign in and of itself, it's this very kind of conceptual, how do you measure narrative change? And it's this kind of blob, but it's the concept of driving culture and where culture goes. And the reality is that people are doing it all the time. It's not like you're creating a new mechanism. It's happening, and we can be the drivers. We can help drive the culture too. That's 100%. What excites me. That excites me so much. Yeah.
100%. And when I'm talking to folks, I also sort of mention that by not investing in this tactic, the culture doesn't we don't stay at the same place. We actually move back. And so investing is not just a nice to have, it's a need to have, because the right has invested in media. They've 100%. Been investing in TV and in their personalities.
Radio. Oh my gosh.
Exactly. Totally. And so we're already behind, but we can't afford to get any more behind.
Right. So every funder who's listening to this episode needs to start funding organizations to do this work.
And by investing in creators from the communities that aren't being invested in, to show them how they're part of this and how they can sort of engage with different issues.
You're pointing out the other facet, which is supporting people from marginalized communities who are the creators themselves, and supporting the work of telling their stories, and, you know, centering the voice of the person with the lived experience. And yeah, I think there's just so much good that can come out of it. So that's why I was so excited when you agreed to come on, because I want to highlight these tools are out there, and maybe that's something to consider. So Ashwath, if folks want to learn about Social Current, or they want to reach out to you or find you or anything, what are your deets? What do they need to know?
You can follow us on any platform at Social Current, or go to our website, socialcurrent.co. And if you fill out the form, I will respond, and I would love to talk about creators. Thank you so much for having me again.
Absolutely. And I'd love for creators in California to come and find you and introduce themselves and let you know that they're out there and they're producing good content, and especially in communities that have not traditionally had a voice in politics and in policy making. And thank you so much. I will put all the information in the show notes. Any final words of advice? So what I'd like to end my episodes is, what is one thing a advocacy organization can start doing right away after listening to this episode?
I would say the best thing to do is find a creator in your community and figure out a small way to work with them, because the most impactful thing we've seen for funders, for organizations around wanting to work with creators, is actually working with creators, seeing a video go live, and then we don't have to do any convincing anymore. Just seeing that impact is the best way to do it. And so, like, reach out to a creator in your community, see if you could do a small collaboration, and go from there.
Thank you so much, Ashwath. I'm so grateful to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. So excited to chat creators with you.